This happened to my grandmother, and she swears up and down that what you are about to hear is true. Many years ago, she had an accident, as old ladies often do, and ended up breaking her hip. She had to be taken to the hospital, and it turned out that she had several problems with her, and that it would take a long time for her to heal. Most of the healing needed to be done in the hospital in order to monitor her and assure she was receiving the proper care, and finally, a care home, a sort of intermediary between hospital and home, before she could finally be discharged. I went to visit her a few times, and the conditions were appalling. There were so many people crammed into such small wards. The air was toxic and suffocating, and I knew my grandmother wasn't enjoying it. However, it wasn't before long that she was moved to a much nicer, far more comfortable place in the care home. I went to visit her there one afternoon and asked her how her day was, brought her some snacks, some flowers, and tried to cheer her up. I spoke with her all afternoon about all kinds of things, and just as I'm about to leave, she grabs my hand and looks at me in the eye. "Don't go," she says. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you, but I keep putting it off because I think I'm going mad." I give her a little smile and tell her it's all right and that I'll always believe her. Probably. She looks around to see who's looking and hearing. Thankfully, there was no one else in the room at the time as she was sitting up in bed. She squeezes my hand tightly and beckons me to come closer, and I do. She says, "There's a little girl who comes and plays in here at night. I don't know if she's one of the workers' children or something, but she's always here. She wakes me up when she skips across the room. She picks up things and puts them back like any curious child, and after a few minutes, I hear her singing gently in the corridor and then disappear." I look at her and ask, "Is that all?" And she nods, but then says, "She's here every night at the same time, 2 a.m. My grandma is a very light sleeper, and at first I told her that it was all right and that it was probably just a member of staff who had a child or something, trying my best to convince her. But my grandmother is no fool, and looked at me in the eye and said, "I think we both know what's going on here." And she was right. We were both confident it was a ghost. But I told her not to worry, and that it might not come back, for she was quite frightened of it. So she ignored it and carried on as I left. I don't visit her for 2 days due to work, and when I come back, I again strike up a conversation with her. She tells me all about how she's excited that she's going to leave, as she's been given permission to leave next week, and she was incredibly anxious to go home. Again, just before I leave, does she squeeze my hand and tell me again that the little ghost girl had returned, but then more curiously, that my jacket had disappeared. She said that when she woke up at the sound of the little ghost girl, that this time she looked at her dead in the eye and just carried on skipping away. The thing is, I left my jacket on a chair next to my grandmother's bed, and when she woke up next morning it had been gone. She asked all of the day and night staff if they had moved it, but none of them seemed to be able to locate it. The days were ticking along quickly, and although I myself wasn't that concerned with the disappearance of my coat, as it was old and worn, my grandmother, with very little to do, had made it her mission to find what had happened to it. She was semi-mobile, as she had one of those frames, and she started scooting around the place, looking up and down, trying to find desperately where this coat was, which was very ill-advised according to the nurses. She didn't find it, but the day before she left, she was growing increasingly annoyed and got in a bad temper with the nurses, saying that they must have moved it and not forgotten, and even accused one of them of stealing it. When she fell asleep, she awoke as usual to the sound of footsteps skipping across the floor. She opened her eyes and saw the little girl quickly dart past the door of her room. And just as she was about to close her eyes again, did she notice my coat resting gently on the chair. She was convinced that either the ghost girl had moved it and was returning it to her before her departure, or she had found where it had been lost and was giving it back. In any case, my grandmother thought it was a very nice gesture and was happy and calm with the ghost girl for one last time. She left the next day, her health improved, and to this day she is still fine. But the question in my mind remained about these strange happenings. So about a year later, when I had some free time, I decided to look into the place where this hospital care home was. It turns out that in 1910, this was a school that operated in the area. It wasn't until the Second World War that this school was hit by a bomb. Although there were no kids here when it happened, there was a family that lived next to the school, and all of the inhabitants of that house perished. I came to find out that a family of 4, a son, a daughter, and a mother and father, had all lived there and died. I know the girl was around 10 years old and the son about 3, so it's likely in my head that the girl could have attended the school very next door to her home, and that this is where she chooses to haunt, as it must be where she spent many an hour and fun times during her brief life on this plane. Little ghost girl, thanks for getting me my coat back. I hope you have a safe and peaceful existence.